Now, a stalled BRI is good news for India and the West. Question is, what do they do about it? Do they wait for the BRI to implode or do they get proactive? I would say option 2. Now is the time to go on the offensive. One such plan seems to be in the works. It's a massive connectivity project. The plan is to link all West Asian countries with trains, those in the Gulf, those in the Levant, and all of them will be connected by train. These trains will lead to shipping ports in the Gulf, and those ports will connect the region to India. So it's a cross-continental plan. Trains will integrate West Asia, ships will connect West Asia to India. So who's on board? 4 countries at the moment. It's the United States, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and India. Their national security advisors met in Saudi Arabia on Sunday. India was represented by NSA Ajit Doval. He held talks with his 3 counterparts. But where exactly did this plan come from? Apparently Israel. Now you may remember the West Asian Quad, also called the I2U2. The 4 members are Israel and India, that's I2, and the UAE and the US, U2. It was set up in 2021 to counter China's influence in the region. In one of the I2U2 meetings, Israel reportedly proposed this, a rail link to integrate West Asia. The White House ran with this plan, and since they looped Saudi Arabia in, Israel could not be part of the project, but reports say that could soon change. It could change in the future. And what about India? Where does India figure in this plan? New Delhi is bringing in the expertise, and frankly, it's a no-brainer. India has the 4th largest railway network in the world. Total passengers, around 24 million every day, plus 203 million tons of freight. Nobody knows better when it comes to railway integration. So that's how the plan came around. But what's in it for each party? For the US, it's a chance to contain China's influence, to offer an alternative to the BRI. Also to patch up ties with Saudi Arabia. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is no fan of Joe Biden. He's been reaching out to Beijing lately. Even let them broker a peace deal with Iran, so Washington is eager to retain its old ally. For Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the gain is material. A solid railway network in the region, it means more connectivity, easier trade and easier tourism. For India, there are multiple gains. The obvious one, of course, is connectivity. India's trade with Gulf countries is almost $154 billion. Most of that is oil. The shipping lanes could help increase the trade. It will also help the Indian community living in the Gulf. How many people are we talking about? More than 85 lakh. They are the backbone of most Gulf economies. That's the economic side of things. Politically, this project is even more important for India. And I'll tell you why. Iran and Saudi Arabia recently normalized relations. It looks like India had no clue about it. Even worse, the deal was brokered by China. This trend cannot be allowed to grow, the trend of ceding strategic space to Beijing. It happened with Iran in 2020. China signed a 25-year cooperation agreement with Tehran. If the same happens with Gulf states, India is going to lose out. That's why this railway project is so important, because West Asia is changing and India must keep up. Look at what's happening in Syria. Bashar al-Assad's regime is back in the Arab League. It was removed in 2011 during the civil war, but now West Asia is embracing Assad again. Last week, Iran's president visited Syria. Soon after, foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Egypt visited. My point is, there is a growing clamor for normalcy, to put conflicts behind, to live in stability, if not peace. Connectivity will be key to that dream. Just look at Europe, for instance. The European Union's origins were economic, not political. Today, those countries are joined at the hip. They don't fight, not because they love each other, but because it would be self-destructive. And I'm not saying that West Asia has reached that stage. I'm saying that should be the goal. And India should actively contribute to it. Push for a multipolar West Asia, not beholden to China or the US. India has the goodwill and the skill to do that. So the West Asian Rail project is a good start, but let's hope it actually goes beyond the blueprint. Let's hope this one actually gets implemented. To Pakistan now, which is making news for another first. Not enough people to go on the Hajj pilgrimage. For the first time in history, Pakistan has surrendered its Hajj quota. It is returning some of it to Saudi Arabia. Why is this significant? Because it shows how desperate Pakistan is for cash. By sending fewer people to the Hajj, it is saving $24 million. Much needed money, no doubt. But it says a lot about Pakistan's situation and priorities in the face of a cash crunch. Thousands of Pakistanis are skipping the annual pilgrimage because they don't have enough money to make ends meet. Our next report tells you more.
Pakistan, a country in the throes of an economic crisis. The Pakistani rupee keeps losing value. Its foreign reserves are at precarious levels. And it's dealing with rampant inflation. So what has the government decided to do about it? No, not cut its bloated defense budget. Instead, Pakistan has surrendered its Hajj quota. The Hajj is one of the pillars of Islam. Muslims from around the world go to Mecca to complete the pilgrimage. It becomes difficult for Saudi Arabia to deal with the number of visitors. So the kingdom gives a set quota to all nations. Only a fixed number of Hajj pilgrims are allowed from a nation every year. The quota is calculated based on a country's Muslim population, and Pakistan has always complained it wasn't enough. But this year, it had to surrender the quota it was allocated. It's because not enough people signed up for the Hajj. In normal years, Pakistan runs a lottery to distribute the Hajj seats. But this year, everyone who applied could go, and even then the quota wasn't filled. Why? Because Pakistan's economic woes have made the Hajj unaffordable. The Hajj costs pilgrims around $4,300. That translates to 1.2 million Pakistani rupees this year. In rupee terms, that's an increase of almost 70% compared to last year. The exorbitant rise in costs is due to Pakistan's crashing currency. It has made the Hajj unaffordable for many in the country, which is why Pakistan wasn't able to meet its quota. So, Pakistan decided to surrender that unmet quota to Saudi Arabia. If it hadn't, it would have incurred additional costs. Because the government would have had to pay for every empty Hajj seat too. Islamabad would have had to pay Riyadh for travel and lodging even if there weren't pilgrims. So Pakistan decided to cut its losses instead. Reports say it'll save about $24 million. That's money the government could definitely use. And what happened to those extra Hajj permits? Reports say they've gone to Indonesia. But Pakistan's surrender may have long-term repercussions. It regularly complains about the Hajj quota allocation. It has been asking for a larger share for years now. This surrender might mean it'll have issues getting more Hajj visas in the future. So did Pakistan make the right choice giving up its seats? That's a difficult question. On the one hand, there may have been other avenues to save money, like the bloated military expenses we mentioned earlier. But then, is it the government's job to facilitate pilgrimages? Isn't religion supposed to be a personal thing? Then why are pilgrimages subsidized? Shouldn't the onus be on religious bodies and trusts and not the taxpayers? Pakistan's quota surrender was to cut costs, but maybe it can start a conversation about the government's role in religion.
Now let's turn our attention to the Far East. Japan and South Korea are burying the past to fight a common adversary. It's a very significant realignment in the region. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida went to Seoul, the first such visit by a Japanese Prime Minister in 12 years. It's a two-day visit. The idea is to move on from the past and move towards a future of cooperation between the two Asian tigers. They're both US allies and both at the receiving end of a nuclear-armed North Korea. Yet they share a difficult relationship, a difficult past. South Korea was once a Japanese colony. This was during the Second World War. Japan was part of the Axis powers. It invaded and colonized Korea, also parts of China and many Southeast Asian nations. And Japan left behind a horrific legacy, a legacy of forced labor and sexual slavery. Millions of people were forced to work in Japanese firms to fuel the war effort. Hundreds of thousands of girls became what they called comfort women, a euphemism for forced sexual workers. All this is well known and well documented, but Japan has always tried to avoid taking direct responsibility for what happened. In 2015, Japan's then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made a provocative statement. He said he would not allow future generations to be, quote-unquote, predestined to apologize. And it's a line that Kishida has maintained, the current Prime Minister. But in the interest of mending ties, he made this statement yesterday.
My heart aches as many people went through a very difficult and sad experience in the harsh environment at that time.
Now, this was not an official apology, but a personal show of grief. Will it help heal the wounds of the past? South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol is hoping that it does.
I think we should move away from the perception that we cannot take a single step towards future cooperation unless the past is completely settled.
Yoon has been attempting to move forward for a while now. It started with his decision over forced labor compensation. This story dates back to 2018. South Korea's Supreme Court passed a verdict. It said that Japan had to compensate the victims of forced labor. Tokyo was furious. It led to a trade war between Japan and South Korea. Japan imposed export controls on goods to South Korea. South Koreans boycotted Japanese goods. Trade between the two neighbors nosedived. But then South Korean President Yoon came up with a solution. He said that South Korea itself would compensate these victims of forced labor. And this effectively absolved Japan of the responsibility. And with this decision, Yoon helped end the diplomatic row. But the controversy over Japan's past is far from over. Listen to this.
Today, the Japanese Prime Minister is visiting Seoul, and it's the first visit in 12 years by the Prime Minister. But if you look at the previous summit, you will be reminded of how South Korea was very submissive to Japan. I think the Japanese Prime Minister is shameless for making the visit despite the opposition in South Korea. He has to at least make an apology on the illegal occupation of the Korean peninsula. Also, we are here today to oppose the strengthening of the South Korean-Japanese military cooperation.
The previous summit took place last month. That's when Yoon visited Japan. He set the stage for Kishida to reciprocate. It's a resumption of what's called shuttle diplomacy between the two countries. But despite the improvement in ties, many South Koreans see Yoon's overtures as weakness. His critics feel that he's let Japan off the hook. But his reason is simple.
Japanese Prime Minister Kishida and I share the recognition that North Korea's nuclear and missile development poses a grave threat to peace and stability, not only on the Korean peninsula and Japan, but also throughout the world. In a situation where trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the US, and Japan is essential in responding to this North Korean threat, we agreed that close communication and consultation between the leaders of South Korea, the US, and Japan, including a trilateral summit, will be very important during the upcoming G7 summit.
Yoon sees North Korea as the biggest threat to his country. Japan and the US are ramping up action against North Korea. It makes sense for South Korea then to bury the hatchet and unite against a common enemy. A G7 meeting is coming up later this month. It will be hosted by Japan in Hiroshima. There's to be a trilateral summit at the sidelines. A summit between the US, Japan and South Korea. They'll work on a united military front, an effort to counter not just North Korea but also China. It's with this in mind that South Korea is looking to move past its differences with Japan. It does not wash away Tokyo's past crimes, but Seoul does not want history to jeopardize its future. I have news for you, and for a change, it's not about war or an impending recession or a virus. It's more personal, and it's good news. Firstpost has crossed 1 million subscribers on YouTube. In a world of more than 8 billion people, this may seem like a very small number, but for me and my team, it means a lot, more than we can put in words. And I'm here to thank you for your support, because this has been a very special journey, both personally and professionally. In a country with 400 news channels, who needs another news platform? We asked ourselves this question every day as we put together the show for you. Why should you watch us? Why should you subscribe to us? We think of this every day. When we started in January, we had less than 200,000 subscribers. It was a very, very small base, but you cheered us from the word go. We launched Vantage on the 26th of January this year, and you joined our journey. In a post-pandemic world, going viral can be a tricky affair, but trust me when I say this, we are not complaining about this virality. You watched and shared our stories, and they started coming back to us. It's the biggest prize, I say. If you think I'm getting carried away, please bear with me. Like I said, this has been special. It's been a learning curve. Because we knew our stories, we understood our subjects, but we were getting used to the medium. You helped us with feedback and so many comments. Thank you for writing. You told us what won't work and what we shouldn't be doing. Thank you for critiquing. And you kept coming back every day to watch us. Thank you for watching and subscribing. We hear you, so keep the conversation going. We truly believe that in this day and age, time is more valuable than anything. And you give us your time. We are committed to making it worthwhile, to highlighting India's perspective on global issues, to tracking developments that shape our world, to reading between the lines and to telling stories that really matter. In the weeks and months ahead, we will bring you more shows. We are entering a very exciting phase. We want to experiment. We want to take you where the story is. You know, they're right when they say that storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas in the world today. And you help us hone that skill. So thank you for making us 1 million strong. I say, we're only getting started. Paris has been cities across France.
And there they go. It looks like
The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.